Welcome to part 2 of the story behind the gear, and I'm going to continue my cymbal journey. What has made me and my cymbal sound be what it is today really started along this journey 49 years ago. So today I'm going to talk about Sabian cymbals. Now, I have a whole bunch of Sabian cymbals. I played Sabian cymbals most of my career. My first Sabian cymbals came in 1988. I'm going to tell you that story. And I'm going to tell you why they came and what I was going after at that point in time. After I got into Sabians, I stayed with them for a long, long time. All the way up through 2013. Maybe even up into 2014, you would see I have a few videos of me playing Sabian cymbals. I actually have a bunch of videos of me playing Sabian cymbals. But if I was doing gigs, I was using Sabian cymbals. Then something changed. And that was me wanting to get closer and closer to this sound that I've had in my head the whole time. The thing I didn't talk about in the first video was the sound, because truthfully, the sound of ride cymbals at that point in time, in 1975, was the sound of what they gave me. I remember going to Blue Note Music and getting that ride cymbal with the kit. It was kind of priced into the kit. I didn't know what I was choosing. My grandmother didn't know what she was choosing, but it came with a ride cymbal. That was the one they gave me the deal on. And those new beat hi-hats. Now, by the time I got to buying a set of cymbals for myself, really 1988 is the beginning of me really choosing ride cymbals and being after a sound. And that would continue all throughout 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, right up to today. And it's funny, I've kind of come full circle with my sound choices since that point in time. But I will tell you my inspirations, and I will tell you a few stories that will kind of help you understand how I've gotten to where I've gotten. So let's talk about the next part of the list. Now, I have some of these cymbals. I don't have all these cymbals. So I'm going to try to show you some of the cymbals I had. In the last episode, I didn't have very many of the cymbals. I had the Rude hi-hats, and I've already introduced them to you. The Rude hi-hats would be a staple because my first set of Sabians, I didn't have a set of hi-hats with them. Okay, I wouldn't get Sabian hi-hats until 1990, and that was 13-inch AA hi-hats, regular hi-hats. But let's talk about Sabians. So in 1988, my brother Nick, decided he wanted to buy me a birthday present, and he took me to Manny's Music in New York. And I'm not going to tell you the total backstory because in actuality it's kind of shameful to talk about the full story, how I got these cymbals and what a great deal we got on them. But I will say this. That day there were 3 cymbals that I heard, and my brother was going to buy me 2, but the guy made the deal so sweet we ended up getting 3. Now, the 3 cymbals were this 19-inch ride, which is a 19-inch medium heavy ride, HH. Sabian was making hand-hammered cymbals, and the idea of getting a dark K cymbal did come into my brain when I was in college. Matter of fact, that 18-inch sizzle ride that I talked about in the last video, that 18-inch sizzle ride, the jazz drummer that was playing, a guy named Steve Dunn, was playing on. He goes, "Man, this is really dark. It's really cool." And he dug it for an A. He thought it sounded pretty cool for an A. It had K-like qualities to it. And it was kind of like everybody was looking for that dark thing. So I was no different, even though I was a good rock drummer, really, and a commercial drummer. I was no different. I was looking for that dark thing. And Ks came in, the early American Ks came in, and the Sabian HHs. Matter of fact, the first Ks that I saw that were not from Istanbul were the Canadian Ks. And I remember playing them in Sam Ash in the 80s. And the Canadian Ks are actually the same cymbals that were in the Sabian factory, because the Sabian factory is where they made Canadian Ks. And when Sabian was created by Robert Zildjian, when the brothers split the business, he started making Sabian HHs. Hand-hammered. Sabian hand-hammered cymbals. They were no different than the Canadian Ks. Now, this particular set that I got were all brilliant finish. You can't tell that today because this is 1988. This is a brilliant ride. Brilliant thin crash. So I had a 19-inch medium heavy ride, a 17-inch crash, and an 18-inch, and this is not the original. The original is owned by my good friend Pat O'Donnell, who has the original one that is circa this logo. This is the logo of the second version of Sabian HHs, I believe. There was a smaller logo that was on the early ones. This is the second logo. So this is the mid-80s hand-hammered, before the 90s hand-hammered, which this one comes from. This is more of the 90s logo, okay? But it's the same cymbal. Sabian made some pretty unique cymbals back then. One of them was this sound control ride, which had this flat lip on it. This is a beautiful ride cymbal as much as it is a crash cymbal. Anyhow, this is the 90s version of it. I would end up replacing the Pat O'Donnell cymbal. In 2010 or 11, I bought another cymbal just like it. This is 1,350 grams, but it's as close as I'm going to get. But those are the original cymbals. Now, what was I after that day? Well, when I played the crashes, they went well together. And they sounded basically around the same. This sounds about the same. Big, explosive, opened up. It reminded me of Jeff Porcaro's crashes, even though I know he was playing Paiste at the time. It was big and explosive and opened up. And this did the same thing. The ride cymbal, though, what was I going for in the ride cymbal? Well, the ride cymbal, I was actually trying to go for a kind of a Gad thing. Because Gad always had this kind of dry ride. Now, this isn't exactly dry, but what I used to do back in the day, and I don't think I have any on here right now, is I used to put gaff tape on this thing. And it was very common for me to have a piece of gaff tape across this and have it much more this, where it dried it up a lot. But this is the sound. Had a nice bell, has nice presence. It actually works in a commercial setting, and I played a lot of club dates with this. I played a lot of rock gigs with this. It really worked, and I liked it a lot. And that was my ride cymbal on my wife's album, for the most part. I mean, I did have, by that point in time, I had a few other cymbal choices to use, but I remember using this mostly on the album. And this crash is all over my wife's album. But these came in 1988. My brother bought these cymbals for me in Manny's. And that started my obsession with getting a full Sabian set. Now, the next thing I bought was the 13-inch hats. 1990 at Sam Ash. I picked them out myself. 13-inch AA regular hats. So I would switch between the 13s and these 14-inch Rudes on a lot of gigs, depending on what I was doing. The other thing that I bought at that time was I wanted a China cymbal. I always liked China cymbals. And one of the things I bought, which I didn't mention in the last episode, was I bought a 16-inch Wuhan China. Matter of fact, it's on the Saved by Grace album cover. There's a picture of the Sabian, it's not a Sabian, the picture of the Wuhan China up here at this height. I had this thing about getting photographed with cymbals back in the 80s. I was in a wedding band called Stardust. And the lead singer somehow got somebody to write an article for a bride's magazine. and they took a picture of the band. And I'll never forget this. I had a 4-piece kit, and I had my Rock 21 ride cymbal, where I always put it in. I sat really low at that point. And the guy who was taking the picture said, "Can you lower that cymbal? Because I can't see your face." I said, "No, that's how I play." So there's a picture of me. If I can find it, I'll put it in here. There's a picture of me with this ride cymbal in my face. You can't really see my face because I'm hiding behind the ride cymbal. Well, when I look at the Saved by Grace picture, it's the same kind of thing where I got this China cymbal way up high, up here, looking kind of cool, you know, and the crash cymbal over here and this. Now, those are the old cymbals. They're not the Sabians. But that was my thing. So I wanted a China cymbal because somewhere in either early 1990, probably around early 1990, I was doing some subbing for my friend Pat O'Donnell on his band Boulevard East. And I remember playing a gig with that China cymbal, and in that last set, I remember the China cymbal cracking, because all night it kind of sounded good, and then all of a sudden I hit it, and it lost all its tone. It was dead as a doorknob. And I had to trash it. Now, a 16-inch Wuhan didn't cost a lot of money in the 80s, so that's why I had one. But I didn't want to buy another Wuhan because they were kind of brittle, and I've had a lot of Wuhans. My history of Wuhan cymbals, I've had a 12-inch, a 14-inch, an 18-inch, a 16-inch, and I have a 20-inch Wuhan now. So I've had a variety of Wuhan sizes, but they never sound really beautiful. So I was looking for a Sabian China cymbal. One day I would have a China cymbal that was Sabian, and it came through my hands. Again, it was another Pat O'Donnell cymbal, but it didn't stick, and I didn't really like it either, by the way. But I will tell you this. I went to Sam Ash with my wife in Edison, and I was trying out crash cymbals, and at that time, the Carmen Appice Sabian China was out. And the Carmen Appice Sabian China was like nickel. It had some nickel in it. It was kind of a really nasty sounding cymbal. It was like a Wuhan. Matter of fact, Carmine loved Wuhans. So this Carmen Appice China was like nasty like a Wuhan. Anyhow, I played it. My wife goes, "You can't buy that cymbal. It sounds terrible." And she walked over to a tree that had a China cymbal on it. And it was a Paiste signature, one of the early Paiste signatures. And she walked over to it and she hit it. And that was the one I bought. Now, I had no rivets at the time. And of course, it wasn't cracked like this one is today. I eventually cracked this probably about 2016, 17. And you can't even find the crack. That's the strangest thing about this cymbal, but it's cracked. I know it is. It's very hard to see. But this cymbal doesn't have the life it used to have. Now, the one thing about the Paiste signature metal, as I like to tell people, is it does dent up a lot. So if you buy signature alloy metal, it's a softer metal than a B20 or the B8, by the way, and it will bend up pretty good. The B8 bends too a little bit. But this was the cymbal I bought without rivets, and I used this for years with my Sabian cymbals. So my Sabian setups would always have two crashes, this China, occasionally the Rude hi-hats, or the 13-inch AAs, and then I had some splash cymbals. And the first splash cymbal I bought was a Sabian AA. I bought this over at, I guess I bought this probably at Sam Ash too, probably. 8-inch splash. Really nice splash cymbal. Really sounded nice. Always liked it. And there's a picture of me at Creation Fest where I have two splash cymbals. And I think the other one was the 8-inch Zildjian, to be honest. But I eventually bought a 10-inch splash at Rondo Music in New Jersey on Route 22. That was cleaned off. And this was probably in the 90s I bought this. This was a 10-inch for $35. So I had a couple splash cymbals. And eventually in the 2000s, I would buy an HHX. And I bought this HHX Evolution splash. So Sabians, my main Sabians were these. This was my main Sabians. Now, in the process of that, in the 90s, I started buying other things. And, you know, job got better, making more money, occasionally getting bonuses. playing gigs, whatever. So here's some of the cymbals I went through during that period. One of them I bought in 1994 was a 14-inch AAX Studio Crash. I really like small studio crashes. Now that cymbal I gave to my friend Ken Burton. He's got that, or he sold it already. But it was a nice little 14-inch studio crash that I used a lot in church. And eventually I would get a 15-inch studio crash. And I had a 14 out of 15 at one point. These two cymbals really went together well. So I got into AAXs. My friend Pat, who was an endorser at the time, he had some extra cymbals hanging around, and we made some trades. One was for the infamous Sound Control 18-inch cymbal. And in that one of the trades, I got a couple other cymbals from him. And one of them was a 10-inch AAX Splash. I got a Manhattan Ride, a 20-inch Manhattan Ride that I eventually traded through me to my friend Scott Hazen that I used for a while. A couple other cymbals came to me during that era, that infamous era of the 90s when I bought a Vistalite kit. I would eventually buy a green Vistalite drum kit, and with that came some Zildjians, 15-inch hi-hats, new beats, which they went through me, a Cajun crash that went through me. I think there was a 20-inch medium ride in there that I used for a while and kept, and then eventually sold and went through me. So I touched other cymbals, as always, you know. Couple other things that happened in the late, after I got the Sabians, was my brother, who was playing drums in the mid-'80s, stopped playing drums. And I ended up with his Yamaha kit, which I eventually sold. I sold it to my friend Scott. That's another story for another day. But with that came a 20-inch 404 ride. I had that for a while. And I also had a Color Sounds 5 Crash, black, that I used for a while. So I had some Paistes too that were interspersed. But once I started playing Sabian, most of the time I was going to Sabian, and eventually I sold off the 14-inch New Beats, my original pair. Eventually I sold off the Color Sound 5 and the Paiste 404 ride. I even had a 16-inch 404 Crash from that period. That got sold off. Then all of a sudden, we're like in the early 90s, and I'm working at this company, and my friend is the deacon at the church where we used to go. And right before I left that church, they bought a drum kit from my friend Billy McCabe, first story. And Billy McCabe had this Ludwig kit with concert toms and a 24-inch bass drum and a 13 and a 14, 10 by 14, 9 by 13, 16 by 16 floor tom. He had a Pioneer snare, maple, marine pearl. Then he had 6, 8, 10, 12 concert toms and some Sabian and some Paiste cymbals in there, which was a Paiste 20-inch ride, a Paiste 20-inch 602 ride from early 60s. And then he had a set of 14-inch Sound Edge, which I wish I never got rid of those, which the top was cracked, and I cracked the top, so that's my own fault there. But I should have kept the bottom, man. I wish I kept those cymbals hanging around. But stuff started going out the door because I was so committed to Sabians to get more Sabian stuff. But a lot of stuff came through my hands during that period. When I look at my history of cymbals that goes from like 1988 right through the 2010s, I mean, I had 602 Sound Edge, hi-hats. I had a 16-inch signature thin China that I still have. Trying to look back, the Manhattan Ride went through me. This is a beauty. This is one for the books. Right around 1996, 97, my friend Dave Jones, you all know Dave's son Zach. Dave, his father passed, and they were cleaning out the house. Maybe his mom passed. I'm not sure which, or both, maybe. But his father had a set of Istanbul K hi-hats, 14-inch, really thin, really brittle and fragile. And he came to a rehearsal. We were playing a worship service, and he came to worship service. He said, "Hey, I don't know what to do with these. You can have them, but you can't sell them. And he handed me these 14-inch Cymbal hi-hats. By the way, I never sold them, but I did give them to my friend Scott Hazen. And what we traded for, and it was a known trade that neither of these items would ever get sold. Now, he broke that rule, but he didn't break the rule with the Cymbal hi-hats. He still has the Cymbal hi-hats. But he traded me his 7-inch Nobel Cooley solid maple shell snare drum for the Cymbal hi-hats. It was an even trade, and I used that 7-inch Nobel Cooley on all over my wife's album. That was one of my favorite go-to snare drums I used back in the 2000s. So, but he has those Cymbal hi-hats. I never sold them. They're worth a lot of money. They're worth like $2,000 probably today, because they're the old Ks. They even had the price underneath it, and I think they were like $36 for the pair or something. It's something silly like that. But yeah, I had those. Another thing I got somewhere around the end of the, and I'm reaching back here for this. Something I picked up near the end of the 90s was the Ed Thigpen flat ride. I was playing in a blues band and I really wanted a flat ride. And my wife bought me this ride cymbal. Now, I wanted a little more sizzle at some point, so I added 3 rivets to it. Again, what are we looking at? Dark cymbals, HHs. I loved HHs. Around 99, right around that same time I got this ride cymbal, I also picked up a pair of duo hats. Pat helped me get a set of 14-inch duo hats from Sabian at his price. And I had them for a long time, and then I traded them to my friend Ken again. This is like 2008, 9, 10-ish. And I traded them for a set of KZ hi-hats, 13-inch KZs, which I don't have, but my grandson has right now. Matter of fact, my grandson has my 13-inch AA regular hats. So the Sabians are still around, those Zildjian KZs are still around, but the duo hats are not. Another cymbal that came through the early 2000 period, because Pat was an endorser at the time, Pat helped me buy a ride cymbal that was very unique, which I wish I had, but I sold and got rid of around 2010 or 11. It was a 22-inch Evolution ride. So it was the Weckel ride in a 22-inch version. And it was a monstrosity. It was huge. And I remember taking it on a gig once, and the band leader was freaking out. He said, "Don't play that." And I had to put this one up because it was quieter than that 22-inch Evolution ride. It just roared. It was a roaring cymbal. It really wasn't the jazz cymbal you thought it was. It had the fire of a Dave Weckel, Evolution ride, but it was bigger. So that's when I bought the 7-inch HHX Splash. I bought that ride cymbal, and I bought the AAX Studio Crash, which is beautiful cymbal. AAX Studio Crash, I had a 14-inch AAX Studio Crash and a 15-inch AAX Studio Crash. Today, the AAX line doesn't have studio before, but the studio ended up being the thin cymbals. I always like thin crashes. That was my Sabian journey. That was what I was doing. I was getting thin crash cymbals. As I got older, I wanted bigger crash cymbals. I got a 19. I wouldn't get a 20-inch crash until I bought a Paiste in my next era of cymbals in 2013. But thin crashes, AAXs. My Sabian journey kind of ends right around 2012, and I bought my last Sabian cymbal in 2012. And I'm really skipping over a few things because there were I was toying with Paiste in this period. I was toying with some Zildjians. I didn't buy any. The first Zildjians I started to buy was right around 2008, 2009, and they were used. My friend Dan at DMR Drums, he got me a 20-inch deep ride. Which was a cymbal I wanted from '79. 20-inch deep ride, my friend Billy McCabe had one of those. He also had an 18-inch Canadian K crash. Cool crash. I remember that. But I get diverted here for a second. So I had this thing for wanting to get some Zildjians again. And what ended up happening was I got the 20-inch deep ride. I eventually gave that away on my YouTube channel. For 1,000 subscribers, there was a subscriber named 2112 Drums. I think that's who it was. He was a kid. He was scoping me until I got 1,000 subs. In the morning I got 1,000 subs, he wrote me a message on my video of the day that day. And he basically said, hey, you hit 1,000 subs. And he won the cymbal. So there's a video of the 22-inch, the 20-inch deep ride out there on YouTube. But I got the 20-inch deep ride, and I got a pair of 14-inch New Beat hi-hats again, hollow logo, 1979, and they came together. The deep ride wasn't as cool as I thought it was, to be honest. I didn't really like it. It was nothing like the Rock 21. It really wasn't a ping cymbal, and it really wasn't dark. It wasn't dark like this. I didn't like it. So I got rid of it. But the 14-inch New Beats I'm never gonna get rid of those either, because they sound great. And I wish I never got rid of my original 14-inch New Beats, because they sounded great too. But for some reason I had the Paiste Rudes and I had the 13-inch Sabian, AAs, and I thought to myself, I don't need the 14-inch New Beats anymore, and I sold them. That was a mistake. But I eventually got a pair back. So another thing that happened in the 2000s with Paiste cymbals, though, they started making prototypes. I bought a couple prototype rides. I bought a 22-inch prototype swish that I had for a long time. I eventually sold that on eBay in the late, I guess I must have sold that thing. When did I sell that swish cymbal? Let's see. I'm looking on my thing here, because I do have them in order here somewhere. So 22-inch switch knocker. That was another Zildjian I picked up. I picked up a couple. I picked up a couple Zildjians during this period too, mostly with trades with Scott Hazen. I had a 17-inch A Zildjian thin crash that I lent to my friend Steve Cruz to record at his studio with a drummer, and it came back cracked. I believe his kid cracked it. The drummer who played it on the session said he didn't crack it. And I happen to know him, and I tend to believe him on that one. But I wouldn't be surprised if one of Steve's kids who was learning drums cracked it. Anyhow, this particular microphone right here, this AK, this is a Audio-Technica ATM 21. My friend Steve Cruz gave it to me because of that 17-inch Zildjian that got cracked. I should have took the cracked cymbal with me too, but I didn't. I left it. Also, there was a jazz drummer in town here at the local music store called Chafin Music, and I bought two cymbals for $65 each. So it cost me $130 that day. I bought a 22-inch switch knocker only had 4 rivets that day, but had 20 holes in it. And I use that occasionally as a switch cymbal. And I also got this cymbal. I didn't know what it was at first, but I found out it was a 20-inch Crash of Doom. So that was a used cymbal. It wasn't until 2011 that my wife bought me a Zildjian 18-inch Armand Crash that I started to think maybe I should get some more Zildjians. And that's where I'm going to leave you. So this is my Sabian journey. Oh, the one cymbal that's not here, my grandson Asher has, it's on his kit, that I bought the very tail end of my Sabian journey. As a matter of fact, there could have been one more, but that was the last one I bought. Was in 2012 at Ellis Drum Shop in Minnesota. I bought a 20-inch Sabian HH medium from the early 80s. And it's as close to this cymbal as you'll get. This is a little heavier, so it's the medium ride version. And actually, the edges were sharp. They cut it quick and they were sharp. I'll never forget that. But great sounding cymbal. I've used it on some things on videos here. I remember going to Maxwell Drum Shop in 2000. I think it was 2014. And I was looking for a Sabian artisan ride. I'm still in Sabian mode. And that's when I bought the Crope. And that'll be for the next story, as we go into the Paiste Zildjian era and my last era of cymbals. So that's my Sabian journey. And I hope you enjoyed this. And if you have any questions or comments or thoughts, let me know. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye.